Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's episode is another edition in the Defining Diabetes series with myself and Jenny Smith. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you have type 1 diabetes or are the caregiver of someone with type 1 and you would like to help with type 1 diabetes research, but you don't want to leave your house or see a doctor, you can do that at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. All you have to do is go over there, join the registry, and complete the survey. When you complete the survey, you have helped. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. Eversense is going to let you break away from some of the CGM norms you may be accustomed to. No more weekly or bi-weekly hassles of sensor changes. Never again will you be able to accidentally bump your sensor off. You won't have to carry around CGM supplies. And worrying about your adhesive lasting? Well, that's a thing of the past. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Jenny, we are going to define something today, something that I'm kind of confused that we haven't gotten to already.
Okay.
Yeah, this happens every once in a while where I look back at the list.
Definitions where you're like, oh, that word.
Yeah.
I guess. No, we didn't ever tell people what that is.
So this has been on my list for a very long time, and I guess we probably kept skipping it. I probably kept skipping it because it's kind of a big nothing burger, but at the same time, I don't think it is.
Okay.
You have to pronounce it because I can't even pronounce it.
Prandial.
Okay. Now, it's going to be one of those things that you hear your doctor talking about all the time. And I have just look, you could go Google it and look it up and whatever, but in a 10-minute podcast episode, we can kind of talk about what it means and how it works into your life. But I think your doctor should probably just say what?
All it means is after the meal, we're looking at what happens to your blood sugar. Obviously, in the case of diabetes. But yeah, it just means after the meal, really. Post intake of food.
So is it Prandial?
Prandial.
Okay, so postprandial means they're usually saying it. How does your doctor usually say it? Like you're seeing a postprandial spike.
Correct.
That's
yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Will people say postprandial low?
You could, because really it doesn't have anything to do with the value of the blood sugar in and of itself. It really just means that it's following a meal. It's after you've eaten something, right? So it has no definition to actual being too high or being too low. You could refer to, gosh, you're having a lot of postprandial low blood sugars. That must mean that your insulin to carb ratio isn't quite right. Or maybe you are pre-bolusing for too long. Or maybe you're always going for a walk postprandial. And maybe that's causing the low. And so we need to adjust the bolus that you take at the mealtime so you don't have that postprandial low. So, yes.
I'm going to read a definition. So,
okay.
Postprandial refers to the period after a meal. In medical context, it often relates to the body's metabolic process following food consumption. For example, postprandial blood glucose levels are measured to understand how the body processes glucose after eating. This period is critical for assessing metabolic health, especially in conditions like diabetes. So now, interestingly enough, I did not ask for a definition specific to diabetes.
Okay.
All I said was define postprandial, and it went back to that. Now, what other terms do doctors use that they shouldn't be throwing around in the doctor's office because they're confusing? This whole series started because, famously, I had a person tell me they didn't know that they were using basal insulin. They didn't understand that. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then we look at it, and basal means baseline and all this other stuff that I learned while you were explaining it to me. But I just think that it's just one of those situations. You get involved with a doctor, they start throwing out terms, and they're rolling through them because they're daily terms for them, but they're words you've maybe never heard before. So Here we are making the shortest defining diabetes episode in the history of the podcast.
I think it probably is, because there's really not much more to it. The word just means after a meal or following eating periods or whatever. That's it. There's nothing else.
Well, then, damn it, Jenny, we're done. I'm not going to stretch this out. I actually sat here and I thought, like, can I make this longer, like, and valuable? And I'm like, I don't think I can. I think this is what it is.
This is it.
But it's something.
But hopefully it helps clear it up for somebody who is clearly wondering what their doctor is talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, could you potentially figure it out if the doctor's always talking about blood sugars around meal times, and then you're saying, well, it was fine before the meal. That must mean after I ate, my blood sugar is always high or always too low. But again, the word is just, why can't they just tell you after you've eaten, it looks like you're always high?
Right. I assume your context clues will help for a lot of people, probably pick it up. But for those who just get stuck on, I don't know what that means, then start to panic, which is what happens. Like, I swear to you, I sat in a doctor's office one time and they're saying this thing over and over and over again. I just raised my hand. I don't remember what it was. I was like, I gotta stop you. I don't know what you're talking about. But I don't think a lot of people feel comfortable doing that, So anyway.
True. I think because many people look at the doctor as the knowledgeable party, but people also don't want to feel like they're uneducated. And I mean that like in a broad sense, right? They don't want to feel like, gosh, I have to ask something about this. I've had diabetes for 30 years and I don't know what this word means. And now the doctor's saying it. I'm going to look like the quote unquote, like uneducated or the dummy.
Yeah.
And that's not by no means. You should be able to raise your hand and say, you know what? You need to explain that in my terms, because clearly you've got a lot of medical lingo in there.
See,
I don't get it.
Such a good point, because when I see adults, especially like you said, who have had type 1 for a long time, you'll see them in the Facebook group. They'll learn something from the podcast. When they come to say thank you or they come to share a thing they learned, so often you see a little bit of an apology before they tell you, I'm so embarrassed to say this because I've had diabetes for so long, or that kind of feeling. And I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to hear post-prandial and go, I know what that means. That means after meal. And then just
yay,
on with your life. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. And Eversense is the implantable CGM that lasts 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Have you ever been running out the door and knocked your CGM off? Or had somewhere to be and realized that your adhesive was about to fall off? That won't happen with Eversense. Eversense won't get sweaty and slide off. It won't bang into a door jamb. And it lasts 6 months, not just a couple days or a week. The Eversense CGM has a silicone-based adhesive for its transmitter, which you change every day. So it's not one of those super sticky things that's designed to stay on you forever and ever, even though we know they don't work sometimes. But that's not the point. Because it's not that kind of adhesive, you shouldn't see any skin irritations. So if you've had skin irritations with other products, maybe you should try Eversense. Unique, implantable, and accurate. So if you're tired of dealing with things falling off or being too sticky or not sticky enough or not staying on for the life of the sensor, you probably want to check out Eversense. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. A diabetes diagnosis comes with a lot of new terms, and you're not going to understand most of them. That's why we made Defining Diabetes. Go to juiceboxpodcast.com, up into the menu, and click on Defining Diabetes to find the series that will tell you what all of those words mean. Short, fun, and informative, that's Defining Diabetes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.